Hello, everyone. I'm Jeremiah Minner. I'm an instructor at Dion Training, and with us today is Jason Dion, who is our Dion Training lead instructor. I thank you so much for joining us. I think you have an ability to put some stuff into the chat. So if you have any questions as we're going along, please throw those into the chat. Or if you just want to shout out where you are joining from, that's always fun to see as well. I'm joining from Colorado Springs, and Jason's joining from Florida. So today we're going to be talking about the CompTIA A Plus 1200 series exams, so 1201 and 1202, and we're going to be talking about that exam and what's changing about it. So Jason, welcome, and thank you for joining us. Could you please give us just a general overview of the exam and what it is?
Yeah, so when we talk about the A Plus Core 1 and Core 2, which the current version is the 1101 and the 1102, this really focuses on hardware and software. So that's kind of the two pieces that we have. A Plus is one of those foundational certs that pretty much everyone's going to begin with when they get into the field, because it really covers all the hardware, things like hard drives and displays and keyboards and motherboards and processors and all that kind of fun stuff. And then we go to Core 2, you start talking about security, you start talking about operating systems like Linux, Mac, and Windows, as well as some networking stuff and some troubleshooting around those areas as well. So really it is the foundation of what we do as IT technicians and field service agents when we get started. And it's kind of the entry point for a lot of people into this whole world of IT. As of the 26th, we're going to be having a change with the exam version going from 1101 and 1102 into 1201 and 1202. And so if you're currently studying for A+, you can finish the 1101, 1102. You've got until around, I think it's October or November. Usually it's about a 6-month overlap where the old version is still active while the new version is coming online. And if you're studying starting today forward, you'd want to be studying the new version, which is the 1201 and 1202. There's a couple of changes and tweaks, and we'll talk about the differences there in a second. But just to make sure people understand that. The other thing is if you've already done one of those, so for example, you've done 1101, but you haven't done 1102 yet, you have to finish the Core 2 for the series you're in. So if you've already gotten Core 1 with 1101, you need to finish Core 2 with 1102. You can't take the 1202. You can't mix and match. So whichever one you started with, you got to finish. And it does take 2 exams to become fully A+ certified. Jeremiah, I guess the next question we probably want to talk about is, what really changed between these 2 exams, right? So, there's kind of 5 key areas. There's security, operating systems, networking, hardware, and AI. So let's talk first about security, right? When we talk about security, some of the cybersecurity topics that they added were things that were newer, things like zero trust model, which really started gaining popularity back in like 2017 to 2019, but it's finally made its way into the A+ exam. Privileged access management, same kind of thing. That was really popular in 2017 to 2021 time period, and now it's getting back into that as well. And then the third area is things like QR code phishing, supply chain attacks, and some other emerging threats inside of security. But in general, that's kind of the 3 main areas under security that have been added. And nothing really got taken away, but just some newer things got added to make A+ more in alignment with the 701 Security Plus exam that comes later on. Jeremiah, when it comes to operating systems, what are you seeing as far as the changes from the old Core 1 and Core 2 to this new Core 1 and Core 2?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. One of the things that I noticed, especially with the old Core 1 and Core 2, was that there was a focus on some Windows operating systems which had turned legacy, that weren't being supported anymore, like Windows 8 and 8.1. The new version, the 1200 series, is really focusing on Windows 11 and Windows 10. I think that's kind of interesting because 3 years from now, when we're having this conversation, we're going to be saying the same thing. They're focusing on Windows 10, which is now a legacy system, because of course that's going to be no longer supported at the kind of the back half of this year. But yeah, we saw a pretty big update with focusing on Windows 11 and Windows 10. There were also some new additions with respect to the file systems that are being emphasized. REFS and XFS file systems are now being emphasized. There are some Mac OS security enhancements that I saw in the material, and then some expanded Linux coverage or expanded command coverage for Linux systems, which is exciting because to me, especially at the A+ level, Linux is scary. Because I'm used to working in that Windows environment. I can point and click and make things happen. But Linux tends to be kind of command line based or terminal based. And so starting to get that introduction more here in the A plus level is really exciting. So I think that's really going to help us stay current with the latest operating system technologies and kind of leaning forward, just like you said, into those future exams and future certifications like Linux Plus or Security Plus 701. So that's exciting. I also noticed some modernized hardware and networking changes. Can you talk to us about that for a minute?
Yeah, so when it comes to the hardware and networking, some of the emphasis they have is on newer connectivity types, right? So USB-C has been around for several years now, but it's really kind of the dominant thing out there, right? Even iPhones have moved from Lightning cables to USB-C to match up with its Android counterparts. I'm talking to you over my MacBook. I have a MacBook Pro, and all the ports on it I have one HDMI port, and the rest are all USB-C, right? Because USB-C can be used for storage, can be used for data, it can be used for communication, it can be used for video output as well, connecting to a monitor and doing it over DisplayPort or HDMI as well. So there's a lot of benefits there with USB-C. The other one that we no longer talk about in A+, although I will still mention it in my course because I think it's good from a historical perspective, is VGA, or the Video Graphics Array. It's a very old type of adapter. That being said, it's still used out in the marketplace, especially in a lot of corporate environments. So I still cover it in my course, but it's no longer considered a testable topic because we now just really focus on DisplayPort and HDMI as our two main displays. And then when it comes to networking, there is a higher focus on IPv6 and IPEPA, and being more emphasized in A+ than it ever was before. Previously, it was, do you know that IPv6 exists, and do you know what an address looks like? Now we go just a little bit deeper than that, but not too deep, like you will when you get to Network Plus. So, but yeah, it's just making sure people have the modern updates of what's happening here, because A+ is trying to catch up to where Security Plus was from last year and Network Plus the year before that. And then the next area we want to talk about is AI, right? This was another area that was really a big add to this year's cycle. In fact, this is the first exam that CompTIA has that really does talk about AI. And when we talk about AI, they're talking about public versus private AI. They're talking about AI bias and accuracy concerns and privacy. They're talking about data security and privacy inside AI and things like that. So we talk about public versus private. That's using things like ChatGPT, right? If you're using the free version of ChatGPT versus the paid version of ChatGPT, there are differences in the security and what you can do with those. And so they'll have that kind of basic coverage of AI, nothing too in depth. It's just one objective under domain one. I think it's objective 1.10 or 1.11. And there's just a couple of key bullets of explain AI and its uses, that kind of an idea. So that's pretty good. And then the other big change is just some domain weightings, right? They kind of went from maybe 22% here to being 20, and this one was 20, now it's 22. So as they've kind of said, okay, there's a little bit more focus on networking and security, but because we added more there, we had to take away a little bit from operating systems and operational procedures. And so those came down a little while we put more test questions on networking and security. But overall, I think it's a good update that they have with A+. They're bringing things more current. They're making sure we're getting rid of some of those older legacy technologies that you don't need to worry about anymore, and really focusing on what does the world look like as we move forward. And so the 1201, 1202 update is really making sure that you can stay ahead of the curve. There's more security, more networking, more AI, and less outdated content. And really, anybody who's taking A+ in 2025 or beyond should really be starting with the 1201, 1202, vice the 1101, 1102. And so that's really what we're going to be looking at there. So that's kind of the big differences there as we talk about the A+. And I guess the other question is, when you think about A+, this is an exam you're going to be taking. It's a 90, up to 90 questions in 90 minutes, so about a minute per question. And you're going to have core 1 is really your hardware and your networks. Core 2 is your operating system and your software. And this is really designed for people who want to be a help desk technician, an IT specialist, a technical support specialist, a field service manager, or an IT server technician, or a data support technician. All of these are kind of the entry-level roles inside of IT. And that's really where we're looking at when we talk about this Core 1, Core 2, 1201, 1202 series. As I said, it does come out here in March. It's going to be out this Tuesday, actually, on Udemy, which will be tomorrow, which will be the 25th. And I believe the exam starts on the 26th of March. And it's good until the old version, the 1100, you could take up until September 25th. So if you're already started A+, finish that out before September. Otherwise, you're going to have to start all over again. Yeah, so that's kind of my intro. Jeremiah, any other things you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, AI is exciting. Like that's something that I got to tell you, when it first came out, however many years ago it was, this kind of round of large language models, I wasn't a believer. I didn't know if I really bought into it, but over time, I'm more and more of a believer. And as a matter of fact, in all the classes that I teach as well, I'm recommending that students get familiar with AI because it's not going away. And we're starting to see it being used out there in the public work sector as well. So I find that really exciting. I also noticed for troubleshooting is taking a little bit of a different perspective in this version of the courses. Instead of just memorizing the step numbers and expecting a question like what step number or what troubleshooting step is this particular step, it's going to be more integrated into scenario based questions. So here is a situation where we are in the middle of troubleshooting. What would be the next step? So that requires you to know the steps in order and the numbers so that you can answer that question effectively. So I think that's a really good way of, again, trying to lean forward into those upcoming certifications. I see we have a lot of questions here in the chat, and I think we'll be getting to those here in just a minute. So just because we're not answering your questions right now, we will. If you have any questions, like we said, please throw them into the chat. Yeah. All right. What about just some like basics of the exam, Jason? How many questions can we expect? What are some kind of assumptions of a student who is starting to take that A+ certification? What kind of background information do we have?
Yeah, so when you take the exam, it's going to be 90 questions in 90 minutes for each of the exams. You do not have to take them on the same day. In fact, I'd recommend you don't. I'd recommend you do Core 1, get that passed, then study for Core 2 and get that passed. Once you pass both of them, you'll be fully A+ certified. The first 3 to 5 questions on the exam will be performance-based questions, or PBQs, also known as simulations. So for example, on the hardware, maybe I'm going to show you a picture of a motherboard and you need to drag and drop the name of the processor to the processor spot and the memory to the memory spot. Or maybe I'll show you the back of a computer and say, here's a port cluster, which one is HDMI, and you drag that to the right place, or which one is VGA or a serial connector or USB, USB-C, etc. And you'll be able to label those things. You may have things like configuring a RAID array if you're dealing with hardware. You may have things like troubleshooting a RAID array. Things like that would all be fair game on the A+ exam. And usually you'll get those for your first 3 to 5 questions, and then everything else will be multiple choice. As far as who's kind of this exam for, it really is an entry-level exam. And so we're looking at entry-level IT, so help desk, field service technicians, junior system administrators and network administrators, that kind of a role. And really is where you kind of get your feet dirty and get into the business for the first time. Yeah, and then I see a bunch of questions here in the chat, so let me address some of those real quick. And like I said, please throw your questions in the chat. We'll make sure to cover them. So the first question I see here is, the new A+ is dropping on the 26th. Will Dion Training be offering a course for the 1201 and 1202? The answer is yes. Yes, we certainly will. In fact, I've already finished filming that course. It's already been edited, and it is waiting to publish to the day that CompTIA releases, right? So we put that out on the 25th is when we'll put it in for approval on Udemy. Should be up either the 25th or 26th on Udemy. On Dion Training's website, Christina, if you can just throw in the private chat, I believe it's going to be out on Wednesday the 26th. I think they're all ready for that, but if you can confirm that for me, I'll make sure we let everybody know, but I believe it's going to be there. I just was told we don't have a date yet for the Dion Training version, and the reason is CompTIA hasn't released their labs yet for it. So for those of you who know the difference between a Udemy course and a DionTraining.com course is that on Udemy, you're getting the videos of the course, right? And you're getting our study guide, but you're not getting the labs. In our site, we actually support hands-on labs as well, where you get to practice those PBQs and those simulations, and you configure networks and build RAID arrays and all that kind of hands-on stuff. Udemy doesn't support that, which is why it's only on Dion Training. Unfortunately, those labs are not ready yet. So until they are, the course isn't available on Dion Training. And so we still have the version 11 series out there. But on Udemy, as of tomorrow, you will see version 12, which is the 1201 and 1202. If you bought on Udemy the 1101, 1102, I see that Annie had asked, She had bought the A plus Core 1 and Core 2 on Saturday and then found out there's an update. Well, the good news is, as of tomorrow, that 1101, 1102 course that you bought is going to automatically turn into the 1201, 1202 course for you. So if you bought on Udemy, you get the automatic upgrade, no problem at all. If you are in the 1101, 1102 course and you're already starting that course and you're already like halfway through, for example, make sure you look out for the emails from our support team, because we give you access to that old legacy course on Udemy, but the course you have will be updating to the version 12 tomorrow. And so I know that gets a little confusing. It's just the way that Udemy does things is when a new version comes out, we have to basically invite you into an archive version that you can accept to get access to the old course, and your course that you're in will automatically update to the new course on the release day. So you're always getting the latest course with Udemy. But if you want to keep that old version, you have to take this one action of going over. So the answer is yes. Dion Training has a course on Udemy as of tomorrow, which is the 25th, and we should have it up on Dion Training anytime in the next week or two, as soon as the labs are available from CompTIA, which should be the 26th or 27th.
Jason, quick question on that. Certainly, if I were a student, I would want kind of the latest and greatest 1201 material. But from a hiring or a certification perspective, what are you seeing? What's your experience with hiring managers as far as, do they require you to have the newest and latest and greatest, or is keeping that 1101 certification current? What are the pluses and minuses with that you've seen?
Yeah, so a great question. So I know especially a lot of new students get kind of wrapped around the axle on, oh no, I'm now certified 11 and not 12. From a hiring manager perspective, we don't know what you're certified, right? We only know that you're A plus, because when you're certified, it doesn't say you're a certified A plus 1101 technician. It just says you're a certified A plus technician. And so whatever certification is valid when you took it is what you get certified. In fact, if it wasn't for me being an instructor and taking every exam that comes out, I was actually certified back in the year 2000 was my first time I got A plus, which was the 301, 302 series exam, right? Our new thing that year was that USB was added, because USB was not on the exam prior to 2000, right? That's how old we're talking. This is Windows 3.1 days before we even had like Windows 95, right? Or actually Windows 95 wasn't even on the exam because they hadn't updated to that yet. That was coming out the next year. Anyway, the point is, when you're certified, as long as you keep doing your continuing education credits every year, your certification remains valid. So for most of us, we get our A plus, and then within a year, we get our Network Plus. When you get Network Plus, it renews your A plus for another 3 years anyway. Then you get your Security Plus, that renews your A plus and your Network Plus for another 3 years. And so most people will never take the new version of the exam. They'll just be certified by getting those continuing educations or taking the higher level exam, like going to Network Plus, Security Plus, CYSA, Pen Test, or Security X. And every time you do that, you're adding 3 years to your other certifications too. So that's a way to keep current. I saw another question here in chat that's relevant to this. I'm going to pull this up here as well. For those of you who are already A plus certified under 1101 and 1102, what steps do you need to take in response to this exam? And the answer is none. You are already certified if you've passed your 1101 and 1102 as an A plus technician, and you're good for 3 years from the date of that second exam of when you passed the A plus Core 2. So let's say that was last year, you're still good for 2 more years. Now, in 2 years, once you get to the end of the 3-year cycle, you have 2 options. One is you can retake A plus at the current version, which would now be 1201, 1202. And if you do that, you will get recertified. Or you could take the next level higher, like Network Plus or Security Plus, and that will also renew your your A plus again. Or you can log training hours and pay a $50 fee to CompTIA that's called Continuing Education Units, and that will also renew you. So those are your 3 things. You can retake the exam of the new version of the same exam. You can take a higher level exam, or you can study and then just basically claim your study hours. For A plus, if I remember correctly, it's 40 hours over a 3-year period. So it's like 12 hours per year you need to do studying, 12, 13 hours. So it's very doable. And like if you're studying for your Network Plus, for example, that's a 38-hour course of ours on Udemy. You can take your certificate, upload that to CompTIA and say, I studied for Network Plus, and they'll give you 38 hours towards your 40 hours of A plus. And if you pass the Network Plus, it's automatically, you don't even have to put in the hours. It'll automatically just say you're now certified A plus again. So that's what you need to do. If you want to keep current on the technology, you can just look at the objectives that have changed, i.e., the Windows 11 versus being Windows 8, 8.1, and 10, and the AI and the couple of other things we talked about with networks and security, and that would make you up to date with the knowledge of it, but you don't have to necessarily go take the exam again. So hopefully that answers your question, Daniel. Yeah. All right.
I see a couple questions there, Jason, about if I take a higher level certification, how does that renew? I know CompTIA does have a continuing education website or page that can help people kind of answer those questions. So hopefully that's helpful. The other thing that I've noticed about hiring managers is that sometimes in a job description, it'll say that they require like A+ and then a CE after it, or Security Plus and a CE. And that goes back to, like you were saying earlier, these certifications have been around for a long, long time. And at the beginning of many of them, there was not a continuing education requirement. Once you were certified, that was it. And you were never required to keep current or to update. And so I do see some hiring managers these days requiring the CE version of the exams, which I think is just saying, hey, if you were one of the early folks to take this exam and you've been grandfathered in with a permanent certification, that the hiring managers say, no, we want you to keep those continuing education credits so that we know that you're current with the current information in the industry.
Yeah, exactly. And that actually was a thing that went into effect back in 2011. That's how long ago this happened. So 14 years ago. And what it was that CompTIA originally was not building their certifications in what's known as an ISO compliant way. The ISO 17024 standard is an international standard that says if you're going to have a certification, this is how you must build it. And one of the requirements was that candidates have to re-up their certification every 3 years, either by retaking it or by doing continuing education. Because let's think about it. When I passed my A+ back in 2000, right, we covered Windows 3.1. Me passing that has nothing to do with my ability to pass the exam today of Windows 10 or Windows 11 or even Mac OS X, which didn't even exist back in 2000 when I took that exam. It wasn't even on the exam at all. There was no Mac questions, right? So those kind of things are why it's important that every 3 years you have to re-up your certification, either through continuing education, so you now know about AI, which wasn't covered 3 years ago, or taking the exam again and proving that you can pass those tests. That's why they do that. The other question we had up here was from Dave Thompson. What type of continuing education is approved if somebody doesn't take Network Plus? Generally, CompTIA's rules are pretty open on CEUs. If you go to their website and just type in CompTIA CEU, there's a whole website that will give you what is allowed. College classes count, reading books counts, going through training courses on Udemy or LinkedIn Learning would count. They actually will give you points, like if you wrote a blog post on LinkedIn, I think you can claim an hour of credit. If you teach for a nonprofit and you're teaching somebody else how to pass A+, that could count. There's lots of different ways to do it, but honestly, the easiest thing is to get another certification like Network Plus, Security Plus. Go get a Certified Cyber Resilience Fundamentals, any of those type of things that can be tied back to a domain or objective on A+ will count to renew that certification. So for example, if you took Linux LPI's Linux Essentials, right? That is, a 20, 30-hour course, and that would give you 20 or 30 credit hours towards your A+, because A+ covers Linux. And so going more in depth in Linux would count. Going more in depth in security would count. Going more in depth in networking would count. All of those are things that are covered by A+. And so if you took a cloud cert, if you took a network cert, a security cert, all those will renew that certification for you as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I think sometimes that can be a little bit daunting. And I don't know about you, but we've both been doing this for a long time. And I personally am still going out there and getting new certifications. Because there's so many different certifications out there. There's so many different technologies that we can learn about. And so, if you're like, no, I got my A+ and that's where I want to stay, and Network Plus just seems a little bit too far of a reach, I would encourage you to take those steps. I certainly am. I'm working on a new AWS certification for myself at this time. Jason, I'm sure that you're doing the same thing to keep current. So Dion Training does offer those continuing classes, those ones that are going to be kind of that next level up to help you level up and be able to recertify lower level exams or initial entry level exams while getting those next step in certifications.
Yep. The next question I have, I'm going to throw this one over to Jeremiah as well. What if you took your Security Plus, your Network Plus, and your A+ in the same year? So let's say I just finished my A+. In April, I took my Network Plus, and in July, I took my Security Plus. How does that affect this whole CEU thing?
First of all, wow. right? Well done, right? If you've been able to get through Security Plus, Network Plus, and A Plus in the same year, well done. And like Jason was saying earlier, those higher level or more advanced certifications do recertify the new ones. So what you can do is you can go into the CompTIA website. I think they call it Cert Metrics, and you can look at your certifications and understand exactly what your current date is for renewal. And what I would expect you to see is that the Security Plus certification dates would then overlap, or they would kind of refresh the Network Plus and A Plus, so that all those dates would line up with your Security Plus certification exam. So that's the one that should take that priority and set those dates.
Yep, and actually with CompTIA, they do it a little differently than a lot of other companies. So like with CISSP and ISC Squared, they do exactly that, where they just bring everything up to the current date and say, okay, you passed on July 1st, you're due again in 3 years for July 1st for all three of yours. CompTIA is a little different. When they do their 3-year cycle, let's say you passed your exam in January of 2025, right, for your first exam. Well, technically, you're supposed to now get 40 credit hours for A plus between January 1st of 2025 and December 31st of 2027. Yeah, 3 years, 27. There you go. But because you just took this exam, let's say in June, that was Network Plus, that A plus, you just fulfilled the 3-year cycle. So your A plus is now not due until 3 years from January 1st of 28. So now you're good till 31. You've got 6 years now, essentially, for A plus. And then same thing with Net Plus. Once you get your Security Plus, it actually is going to extend that out 3 years more from when it was supposed to expire. And so now you've got basically, you don't have to even do anything for those other two until you get into that next 3-year cycle, which started, January 1st of 2028. And so by getting the Security Plus, you've now re-upped your network and your A plus. And so to redo your Security Plus, you either get CISA or Pen Test sometime in the next 3 years, or you could retake Security Plus again when the new version comes out, because you can't take the same version. So if you passed on 701, you've got to wait till the 801 comes out, which happens every 3 years, and then take that one to re-up. So, but yeah, that's the way that works. Cool.
I do see a new question here from Dave Thompson asking about some stackable certs and how those work.
Yeah, so stackable certs. So this is something CompTIA started a couple of years ago. I think it was like 2021-ish, so maybe about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. And essentially, if you get multiple certifications, they will turn them into another certification. So kind of like how if you take A plus Core 1 and A plus Core 2, neither of those are a cert on their own, but once you pass both of them, you're now A plus certified. Well, they've done the same thing and said, okay, well, if you have A plus and Network Plus, you are this new certification. And if you have Network Plus and Security Plus, you're this certification. So in addition to getting your A plus and your Network Plus, you're also known as a network security technician or something. I don't remember all the names, to be quite honest, because most of them require 2 or 3 certifications, and I've yet to see any employer ask for these stackable certs. I honestly don't know why CompTIA went down this route of stackable certs. I don't really see a whole lot of value in them. I guess the sales pitch is supposed to be that if I see that you're a network security technician, I should know that you have a Network Plus and a Security Plus. But honestly, if you just put Network Plus and Security Plus in your resume, that means a lot more to me as a hiring manager. So I have a bunch of these stackable certs just because I have all these different CompTIA ones. I honestly couldn't even tell you the names of most of them because they're just, nobody asked for them. So I don't know that there's any value in them. Jeremiah, have you seen any kind of value from these stackable certs besides just making people feel good that they got yet another badge on their account?
First of all, it makes me feel good, Jason. But the other thing that I would say is my recommendation to people who are coming into the industry is if you have those stackable certs, take credit for them. And if nothing else, it might be a talking point or an avenue that you can start talking about. Oh, well, this one here, that means that I have Security Plus and Network Plus. And then that will give you an avenue to start talking about what you learned in those courses and how you value that stackable cert. So yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. But if I'm new to the industry and it's a certification that I can take credit for, then I certainly will try to do that.
Yeah, if you need to fill out your resume, go for it. But what I would tell you is definitely don't just list the stackable cert, right? If you have the one for Network and Security Plus, please put down Certified CompTIA Security Plus, Certified CompTIA Network Plus. And if you also want to put Certified CompTIA, whatever that stackable cert name is, I think it's like Network Security Technician, that's fine too. But definitely put Network and Security because that's actually going to hit more than these stackable certs will for most hiring managers.
Yeah.
Yep. The next one I got here for us is, let me get rid of that stackable cert. Somebody had asked, let's see, somebody wants to start 1201, 1202 now. Is it possible? The answer is tomorrow it's possible. So tomorrow is when our course will launch on Udemy. So if you are normally a Udemy student, you can get that by going to diontraining.com/Udemy. That'll always have our lowest prices for our Udemy courses. If you're a Udemy business student, you'll find it in Udemy Business as well as of tomorrow. It'll say the complete A plus Core 1 1201 course, and then there's one for the 1202 or Core 2 course as well. And then the Dion Training version on our website will be coming out in the next week or two once we have the labs to add with it. Because the big difference on our site versus Udemy is you get not only the video course from Udemy and the practice exam course from Udemy, because there's two courses for that. One has the videos plus one practice exam. The other one has 6 practice exams. So between the two of those, you get 7 practice exams. And then I think we have a second course for an additional 6 practice exams to give you up to 13 practice exams. But if you go on our website, you get all the videos, all the practice exams, the official textbook, the labs, and our pass guarantee all rolled into one package. And that is, I don't remember the exact price, but I think for A+, it's somewhere between like $250, $300 for a student. And that comes with everything you need to take the exam, except your exam voucher. But if you do fail the exam, we buy you a new exam voucher because we believe in our product. If you do the Dion Training version, that comes with the way we can measure your progress over time. But the Udemy version will be out tomorrow. The Dion Training one will be out in the next 7 to 14 days as soon as we get those labs.
Yeah, I think whatever the price is, it's worth it.
Yeah.
Let's see. We do have a question here. It's kind of a big question, considering the job market. We're finding an IT job is increasingly difficult, even for experienced professionals. Do you think it's still worth striving to break into the field? So, yeah, Jason, I'll ask you for your thoughts. I've certainly got some as well, but let's see where we go with this.
Yeah. So the job market is definitely changing, right? And right now, we all know politics has taken over over the last 3 to 6 months. Businesses have been spooked, and they have been halting their hiring efforts until they figure out what's going on. Whether you love the American politics or not, it is having an effect worldwide on hiring, not just in IT, but in a lot of different industries, right? The US has been putting tariffs on things, taking them away, threatening this, taking it away, and then going back and forth and back and forth. And as a business owner, we go, oh, I don't know what the heck to do. So I'm just going to hold and not do anything, right? And so you see this a lot where businesses are going, I may have been planning on hiring 5 more people this year, but since I'm not sure, I'm just going to hold off and not hire anybody and see what happens over the next couple of months, right? So uncertainty in the job market is being caused because of the uncertainty in the political landscape of what we've been having. Another thing that's really is hurting us is a lot of IT jobs were either government jobs or government contract jobs. And a lot of those are being affected based on the new administration and the new politics that's going on. So just be aware that we are in a really rough spot for jobs, both here in the US and overseas, because they always say when it comes to economics, when the US catches a cold, the rest of the world catches the flu, because it's always worse outside of the US because the US is such a large economy. It's the number 1 economy in the world, right? And China's right behind us, right? And then everybody else is kind of down the list. So just keep that in mind that this is an unusual situation. Add to that all the AI advancements that have been happening and companies going, well, I can just hire AI to replace all these people. And they're finding real quick that doesn't really work the way they think it's going to work, right? AI is good. It does a lot of things well, but it's still not foolproof and it is not human replaceable yet. I will tell you, my developers on my team, we use AI all the time, but I would never just say, AI, create me this web page and then use that code. It's full of bugs, it's full of holes. It may work, but it may not. I mean, you still need a developer, right? And the same thing in IT. We saw the same thing with the move to the cloud. Everybody's like, oh my God, networking's going away. We'll never need another network engineer because it's all done in the cloud. Fast forward, now here we are in 2025. And what's the big move right now, Jeremiah?
Yep.
What's everybody doing? Declouding, right? They're all going back on premise, right? They're building private clouds, right? And so guess what? Now we need all those people that we fired. We need them back again. So these things come in cycles and come in waves, and everyone rides the train. AI last year, everybody's like, I'm getting rid of my whole staff. I'm going to use AI for everything. And then they realize, that doesn't quite work out the way we thought it would. And so we still need humans, right? So all that being said, I still see people getting in the career field. I still see people getting hired. The big challenge that we're seeing, and this is especially as you go not in IT, but into cyber, because cyber is a little bit higher than IT, It used to be we had this kind of triangle, right? And we would hire people in at the help desk level, and we needed 100 of those people. And then out of those, we would come up with like 50 system administrators and network administrators. And out of those, we go to 30 cybersecurity guys to eventually get to the, one or two IT directors or C-suites. And so we had this beautiful little pyramid going from 100 up to one, and you can funnel up people, and the best would rise, and that some people would just stay in their jobs. That's fine. The problem is over the last 5 years or so, we've added a lot more automation, orchestration, and now AI. And so our pyramid looks more like this. It's more like a diamond. And so instead of having 100 people at the bottom, I may only need 10 people at the bottom. But I still need 20 or 30 system administrators. And I still need now 50 cybersecurity professionals. And then I need, one or two CIOs. So as I have this diamond, it's really hard to take 10 people and fill 30 jobs or 50 jobs with it, right? And so we're getting this glut where everybody says, I want somebody with 2 to 3 years of experience. But how do you get experience if nobody will hire you because those entry-level jobs have gone away? And that's why it's becoming increasingly difficult to get a job, because I was just speaking this morning at a local college, and they have a whole class of people who are about to graduate. And they're like, we're looking around for jobs, and it's hard to find jobs, right? Now, in their school, they're actually kind of lucky because they're partnered with a local company that when people graduate this school, they automatically get brought into a help desk role at this MSP, this managed service provider. And so they've got that, they're not getting paid a lot, but they have an automatic job for the first year they get out. And then they can use that to get into other jobs, right? But even getting that first job right now is getting much more difficult because a lot of those jobs went away. And I'm going to show my age here for a second. But when I got into this business, I started in professionally doing this in 1995. I was 15 years old back then, is when I got my first job doing cyber and IT and running networks and things like that. And back when I was doing this, I would have people literally hire me to take them to Best Buy and walk them down and tell them which computer to buy, because computers were such a foreign concept to them. They would pay me $50 an hour to go to their house and hook up their printer, because it wasn't as easy as plugging into a USB port. Back then, we used parallel ports, and you had to have drivers and interrupts and all this complicated stuff just to make a printer work. Nowadays, we just plug it in with USB and everything just works right out of the box, right? Most of the time. Same thing with, most of the time now, we don't necessarily do a lot of upgrades to our computers or hardware upgrades to our computers, because most of us are using laptops, and laptops are mostly soldered together, and you just buy a new one because these devices have gotten so cheap. They're like, you know what, this computer doesn't work anymore. I'll just buy a new one for $1,000 because it's cheaper than repairing it, right? And so because of that, a lot of the entry-level jobs have gone away because most of our users know how to install their own software now, because Windows makes it easy. Most of our people know how to use the basics of Windows. It's probably, it's funny because when I used to teach this stuff, 10 years ago, and people would be taking my A+ courses, they always found Core 1 to be easier than Core 2, because Core 1 was all hardware stuff. And back then, people were more familiar with the hardware they use, but they weren't as familiar with the operating systems. Nowadays, it's the opposite. Even though Core 2 has a higher score to pass, more people are passing Core 2 than Core 1 because they're dealing with Windows for most of the exam. And most of us are using a Windows system at home or at school or in our office. And so, with 90% of the population plus using Windows, it makes it a much easier exam to take Core 2 than Core 1 these days, which is kind of a flip-flop of what it was 10, 15 years ago. So do I think it's still worth it? Yes. Do I think it's hard? Yes, it is. Getting that first job is really, really difficult these days. But once you get that first job and you've got a year or two of experience under your belt, it's much easier to move up and move out from there and go further. Jeremiah, what are your thoughts since I went on my little rant?
Yeah, that was a good one, Jason. I think I totally agree with everything you're saying, and it all makes sense. I think one of the things that becomes more important as we see the job market doing what it's doing is networking and getting to know people. And, that way, when there is that job that becomes available, you want somebody in that company, in that organization to go, I have just the right person to fill that role. So I think we start moving away from, maybe not moving away from, just submitting a bunch of applications. That's still a path. But I think we also place a lot of importance on making connections over LinkedIn, going and meeting with other professionals and getting to know them, and getting to know who you are and what you can bring to the table. Because that's going to help you just as much to break into this new field. So I think networking should get or does get a renewed emphasis in the current job market.
I think it's a really good point as well, because people always think, hey, I just went on LinkedIn and I put in 100 resumes. I will tell you, most of the jobs you're going to get are not going to be because you put in a resume on LinkedIn or Dice or Monster. You still need to do those things, because I'll tell you, even if you're going to apply for my company, and Jeremiah knows you and says, hey, I recommend you hire Joe Smith over here. Well, first thing I'm going to tell him is, tell them to put a resume in first through the system, then we'll pull it out. But it needs to still go through the system, right? And so I will tell you, I have a lot of friends who transitioned out from careers in the last 5 years. I don't think of a single one that got their job from going on LinkedIn and putting in a job resume, right? Most, if not all of them, got the job because of the people they knew and the people they worked with over the years, either in the current career field of cybersecurity or in other parallel jobs. When I've known people who were bookkeepers and accountants, and they got into cyber because they work with somebody who's now the accountant at Facebook, and they said, hey, I'm trying to get into cyber. Can you put in a word with the hiring manager? And they went and looked up, oh, the hiring manager is Jason. Hey, Jason, my buddy Jeremiah is looking for a job. Can you take a look? He put in the application. And now at least it's getting out of the filter in the ATS system, the applicant tracking system, where there's 1,000 resumes. I'm going to interview probably 5 people. And if somebody recommends Jeremiah or somebody else that I know, I will look at them first before I look at the other 1,000 people, right? And so often you can bypass this ATS and get your resume down into the interview column. Because if you look at the typical funnel, right, for every job posting, I will tell you, even in a small company like Dion Training, we've got less than 50 employees, right? Our last job, we had almost 1,000 applicants apply for it, right? 1,000 people applying for one position, right? That means you have a 0.1% chance of getting that job, right? But if you got to the interview stage, we only interviewed 5 people for that position. So if you got there, you now have a 20% chance of getting that job, right? And out of those 5, we chose who was our favorite. We made an offer. And if they accepted, great. And if they didn't, we moved on to number 2, right? Because sometimes by the time you get through the hiring process, that person's already got a job somewhere else, right? And then maybe they're just feeling it out to see what you're going to offer, and you didn't offer enough money and they left, right? So there's a lot of different reasons why things fall through. But think about that: 1,000 people to get 5 to 10 interviews to get 1 candidate, right? That is a very typical hiring path, right? And so, when you're like, I've put in 1,000 resumes to get my first job, yeah, because 1 out of 1,000 is going to get a job, right? So it may take you 500. It's very typical for people in their first job putting in 500 to 1,000 resumes over a 3 or 4 month period to find that job. It sucks. I know it's draining. It feels like you're getting nowhere and you're bashing your head against a wall. But once you get that first job, it becomes a lot easier. And the more you can do as far as getting involved in your community, especially in the cyber community in your area, it's going to help you long term. So if you're in an area where there's a B-sides competition, BSIDES, basically is like the second side of a record. That's what they name it after. This is an alternative small conference. They do them in most major cities. Denver, Austin, I believe Miami has one, Orlando, New York, I know for sure, Philly, Baltimore, DC, they all have them. They're super cheap, like 10, $20 to go to, and they happen on a Saturday and Sunday normally. Go there, network around, meet other people. It will help you, I promise. It'll also help you keep up to date with the industry. Other things you can do is volunteer for other conferences. If you live near Vegas or Orlando, for instance, we have conferences all the time. Volunteer and help out with those, because you're going to meet speakers, and that person may be the guy who gets you a job, guy or gal who gets you a job later, right? So those soft skills really do help. Let me see. Over here, we've got 2 more questions over here, and then we'll get back to this other one. So let's see. Oat Milk says, so the new 1201, 1202 will still include Windows 10. The answer is yes. And this is kind of an interesting thing, because CompTIA does their exams on a 3-year cycle. The exam is coming out here in March. We already know that as of October, Windows 10 is going away. Windows 10 is going to be obsolete as of October, which means for 2.5 more years, they're still going to be testing Windows 10, even though it's out of date and no longer valuable. I will tell you, even in the course I still filmed most of my demos in Windows 10, not Windows 11. Why? Because honestly, most businesses and corporations are still using Windows 10, not Windows 11 yet. They will be upgrading over the summer. But that even being said, Windows 10 and Windows 11, they're like this. I mean, they're like 80% overlap. If you could do it in Windows 10, you could do it in Windows 11. Don't worry about that. It's not going to throw you off. The other thing I would say about that is that, there's only a couple of name changes. And for those type of things, I do point those out in the course of, hey, in Windows 10, it's called this. In Windows 11, it's called this. Let me show you how it works, right? So not a big issue there for you. And in fact, if you look at the domains and objectives, there's literally like discuss the control panel in Windows 10 is one objective, discuss the control panel in Windows 11 is another objective. So they are serious about Windows 10 still being tested, even though it's end of life in 6 months, which I kind of scratched my head when I saw that originally. I'm like, why didn't we just go straight to Windows 11 and write off Windows 10? But CompTIA decided to keep it in there. So yes, it's still there. It will still remain. Another question.
I think we'll also see a lot of Windows 10 in industry well after this calendar year, right?
Yeah.
Just like we're still seeing some Windows 8, Windows XP, some of those critical applications that are built on those operating systems are still around. So I still think there's a lot of value in understanding Windows 10. So as you're going through this material, don't read that material as, well, I only need to know this for this exam and then I'm going to flush it. You're still going to see it out in industry.
Yeah, that's a great point. Even as late as the year 2000, when I was still doing this professionally, like working every day in the field, there were servers I was working on that were Windows 2003 servers. And Windows 2003 had been out of date by at least 5 years at that point. But that company had these servers, and they paid an exorbitant amount of money to Microsoft to keep building security patches for them because their network was so large and it was going to cost them so much more to upgrade to Windows 2019, which is what they should have been at that point. And by the time I left in 2020, they had just upgraded to like Windows 2012. And this was 2000, right? So they're still upgrading to something that was 8 years old. That was going to be end of life in 3 or 4 more years. Some businesses, it's just the way they operate. So just be aware of that, especially if you're working in a hospital system or a government situation. They tend to use a lot of old stuff. Another question we had here from Tony was, are PBQs included in the new exam? Yes, they are. Every CompTIA exam you take for the foreseeable future will include PBQs. Generally, you'll have 3 to 5 questions that are PBQs on the exam. For the ones like hardware, like I said, you'll probably have some drag and drops. I've seen some that are like, put the steps of the troubleshooting process in order, and you'll drag and drop them, labeling motherboards, configuring a wireless router, setting up a VPN, setting up a RAID or troubleshooting a RAID. These are all very common PBQs you can expect. Basically, if you see me do a demo in the course where I walk you into the environment of clicking around and doing something, that's a valid PBQ on the exam. So, and you'll see one where I show you how to configure RAIDs. I show you how to troubleshoot RAIDs, both software and hardware. I show you how to go into the BIOS and set up passwords. All those are things that are fair game for PBQs. Essentially, when you look at the domains and objectives, anytime you see somebody that says, given a scenario, blank, 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 that is a possible PBQ. If they say recall or explain or compare and contrast, that is not going to be a PBQ. It has to be, given a scenario, do something, right? Given a scenario, configure a RAID array, right? Given a scenario, add users to a Windows operating system, right? Those would all be valid PBQs. Anything to add on that, Jeremiah?
So we would also expect those PBQs to take more time than your standard scenario question that has, select one from the following 4 answers. So if we know right up front that the first 3 to 5 questions we're going to see on that exam are the PBQs, and those PBQs are going to take us longer to get through, is there a way to manage our time effectively and efficiently to make sure that we don't run out of time in that 90-minute exam window?
That makes sense. Yep.
Yeah, so one of the things that I recommend that people do is, well, when I take an exam, I will read those PBQs and kind of get an understanding. I'll spend 5 or 10 seconds understanding what the content is, what the topic is, and then I'll mark it for review and I'll move on through the next PBQ. Then I'll answer my multiple choice questions, and then I'll come back and dedicate a fixed amount of time to those PBQs. The one time I didn't do that was on my Network Plus exam, and I was squished for time at the end. It went well in the end, but I learned right then and there that I needed to be able to find a way to manage my time effectively so that I could account for those PBQs taking more time than the standard multiple choice questions.
Yep. Okay, let me got a couple more here. So this one, I think we answered this already, but I'll answer it again. What's the difference between doing the course through Udemy and Dion Training? Both of them have the exact same videos and the exact same quizzes and practice exams. The difference is on Udemy, we're only allowed to put 1 practice exam in a video course. So we have 1 course that's all the videos, like 40 hours of video, quizzes, and 1 practice exam. We have another course that's 6 full-length practice exams, and we have another course that's 6 more. So you get a total of 13 exams, but you have to buy 3 different courses. If you're in Udemy Business, they're all included anyway, so it doesn't matter. But if you're buying it on the marketplace side, you're going to pay $10 or $15, $10 or $15, $10 or $15 usually on sale. And so it'll be probably about $40 or $50 to get all of that content. On the Dion Training side, you get all of that in one course, but we also add hands-on labs, which is 40 hours of basically PBQs of learning how to do those, as well as the official textbook from CompTIA, and we give you what we call our pass guarantee. Basically, you have 60 days from the time you buy our course to go through the course, pass the course, and take your real exam. And if you do that, but you fail the real exam, then we will buy you a new exam voucher because we believe you failed based on not learning the things we told you, right? Because we're confident that if you go through our course, you will learn by going through the videos, the practice exams, and the labs. You'll be ready to go and pass that exam. And if we're wrong, we'll pay for you to retake. So that's the difference between the two. There's a big price difference between them. And you can compare them. Just go to diontraining.com. You'll see what A+ costs on our site. If you go to diontraining.com/Udemy, you can see what the prices are on Udemy, and then make your decision there. I think the course on our site is a more in-depth course because you have those labs in the textbook. But for most people, you can still just pass using the Udemy course. It's a great course. Like I said, same videos. It's just you're getting more of that hands-on experience in the Dion version because we support labs and Udemy doesn't currently. So that's that one. Thanks for your question, Annie. Let's see. I have another one here that I thought was a good one. So Jan says, a good idea for those of you trying to get experience is to join the military and get a job in IT. From that, you're going to get hands-on experience and exposure to a lot of different IT areas, and they'll also pay for your certifications by the service. This is true whether you're working as a government civilian, working as a contractor, or you're working as a military in uniform. In fact, if you're a young, able-bodied person, you may want to consider joining the military even as what we call a reservist. For example, I worked with the Navy for years, and we have active duty Navy folk who are there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, going out on ships and doing all of that. But we also have something called the Navy Reserve, which basically is if we get into a big shooting war again, like we did with Iraq or Afghanistan, we need more people. And so instead of drafting, we already have this group of people called Navy Reservists who work 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks per year, and we pay them and they get promoted, and they are a Navy person, whether it's enlisted or officer, during their whole career, but they still have a regular job too. And the nice thing is those people get the exact same training and certifications as the active duty folks. And so, for example, if you're going to become a cryptographic technician network, CTN, which is kind of like government defense and government hackers, those guys, it's about a 12 to 18 month school that they go through. And then they go work for the government doing this for 3 or 4 years out of their contract, because generally it's a 5-year contract when they join. If they're full-time active duty, they'll go to school for a year, year and a half, and then they'll go work at some place like the NSA for the Navy doing this. And you'll get a security clearance, you'll get your certifications, you'll get a lot of job experience. And as soon as you walk out, the contract companies are going to hire you to come right back in doing the exact same job, wearing a polo shirt or a suit and tie as opposed to a Navy uniform. On the reserve side, you do the exact same thing, except you're only working 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. And the other time you have a regular civilian job. But since you now went through the Navy, you've gotten your 6 months or a year of training, you've gotten a bunch of your certifications, you've got your security clearance, and now it's really easy to go in and get a contracting job working as a civilian in the same place you'd be working as a Navy person, right? Same thing for Army, same thing for Air Force, same thing for Marines. All of them have a reserve component and an active duty component. I know that doesn't work for everybody. That works especially well if you're in the US and you're an American citizen. Other countries have different rules, and I know we have a worldwide audience, but for the US, it's definitely a great deal and something you should check out. The other one I have here is, let's see, I got 2 more. David said he hasn't completed Network Plus for a while. Should he continue with the course? Network Plus is kind of a unique one. The information you learn in Network Plus is super, super valuable, right? But I will tell you the certification of Network Plus itself doesn't lead to a lot of jobs. Generally, if somebody's hiring a network technician, they're looking for somebody with a CCNA because it's specific to Cisco gear, routers and switches, and actually has more of a hands-on component than does Network Plus. So Network Plus is great from the knowledge perspective, but I would tell you, I personally would not hire somebody with a Network Plus if they don't have their CCNA as well. CCNA is just much more powerful for networking jobs. A Plus and Security Plus, totally where it's at when it comes to CompTIA stuff. Those are the most well-recognized for CompTIA. Network Plus is a really good knowledge base in between. That's why a lot of people get A plus, Net plus, Security plus. It's hardware, it's software, it's networking, and it's security. And having all of those together really gives you a good foundation. But if you're just trying to get a job as a network technician, Network Plus is not going to really do it for you. If you're using that as a way to learn networks on your way up through cybersecurity, great thing to do, and would not hurt you at all. But really, Network Plus is more about learning what are the devices, how does routing work, how does switching work, what are VLANs, what are subnetting, that kind of stuff. And if you can learn that information, you're ready to move into Security Plus. That's my personal opinion. Jeremiah, what do you think on Network Plus?
I think networking is the underlying assumption for everything security and above. I think you have to understand it. I agree with you because Network Plus is not vendor specific. So you're not going to come out of the Network Plus course being able to sit down in front of a Cisco router and be able to do much with it. But what I like to talk to Network Plus students about is that Network Plus will give you the foundation, and it enables you to be able to do your homework and learn more about networking. So if you're in that Network Plus course and you're trying to build your resume to be more hands-on, then you've got the structure. You're learning about VLAN. So, okay, how can I figure out how to put together a virtual local area network? Let's go grab something like Packet Tracer or GNS3, and let's make a VLAN. Or let's go get some gear, plug it in at home, and then let's make a VLAN. So I think Network Plus has a lot of value in enabling you to build from that. I like the recommendation of CCNA because it just throws you right in the fire and says, all right, here we are in a Cisco command line, make it happen. So yeah, I think if you're taking that Network Plus certification, I highly encourage you to use that as your launching point and to learn more. But I also think that from a security perspective, if you're going in to secure a network, or if you were going in for an investigation or for any pen testing, and you don't fully understand the networking, you're not going to be very effective. So I think it does underpin everything, and I think there are several good ways to get that knowledge.
Yeah. We got two last questions, and then we're going to be signing off because I know we're almost at the top of the hour here. Both of them come in from Cosmin. So Cosmin had said, thanks, still working hard to get the trifecta, then going to move on to CCNA and other certs while building the home lab. Made their CV website, improving the CV. Hopefully that'll make it. Yeah, one thing I want to point out is document your experience as you go, right? For example, the home lab is a great thing, right? As you're building out this home lab, I would actually create Medium articles or LinkedIn articles and post them about how to build your home lab. Part 1, buy this equipment or get this virtual stuff, and then do another article that's 300 to 500 words. Here's how I configured it. Next, here's how I'm using it to learn this thing of, I'm using it to learn, Nmap, and I'm scanning my network and showing where the vulnerabilities are. Or I'm using it with OpenVOS, and here's how I found the network vulnerabilities and how I patched them. And if you document this stuff, when people start looking for your name, when you apply, and I go, let me see who this Cosmin Rodriguez is, and I start finding articles on Medium that he's posted about, his or he or she has posted about their home lab, that shows me they have experience, even though they haven't had a job with experience. Think about how many people are actually doing that versus the number of people who are just going, click here for application again, right? Who's going to get more traction? You are. So definitely do that kind of stuff. And then the other thing Cosmin had asked was when it comes to the exam, there's going to be questions you don't know. Should you skip them? Should you flag them for review? Should you take a guess? What I always recommend is when you sit down to take the exam, the first 3 to 5 questions are going to be those PBQs or simulations. I like to mark those for review and move on. Don't even touch them the first time through because you're going to waste a lot of time on them. They're designed to suck out your time, right? I'd rather you get through all the multiple choice and then come back to those, okay? As you're going through the multiple choice, if there's any questions you don't know, what I always recommend is mark them for review and pick your best guess. There's only 4 options. You might as well guess because if you guess, you have a 1 in 4 chance or 25% of getting it right. If you skip it, you have a 100% chance of getting it wrong. Because these exams do not mark you off for getting things wrong. They only give you points for guessing things right. So you might as well guess if you're in doubt. The other reason why I like marking it is because I might be like, it's either A or B, I'm not sure. Let me just choose one, mark it. And sometimes as you go through the exam, something else will flag your memory and go, oh, I remember that from question 22. I need to go back and change it to B now. I've seen things where, for example, they'll ask you like, what port is FTP in question 3, right? And the answer is 20 or 21, depending on which channel you're using, right? And then in question 68, they'll be like, here's a firewall. they wanted to block the FTP server. Which of the following should they do? And then the answer choices might be like 21, 22, 23, 25. And once you see that together, you're like, oh, wait, 21 is FTP because 22 is SSH, 23 is Telnet, and 25 is SMTP, right? And so sometimes these things will answer themselves. And so I find that to be pretty helpful. So yeah, I would keep that in mind as well as you go. But don't skip. At least mark for review and pick a choice because you have at least a chance of getting it right. Even if you run out of time and don't have time to come back to the exam, at least you had an answer selected. Whereas if you skip completely, you're going to 100% get that wrong, right? So take a guess if you can. All right, that is everything I have prepared. So I will pass it back to Jeremiah if you have any other questions, comments, or concerns.
No, the only thing I'd say there at the very end, there is, as you're finishing up your exam, there is a page that lets you go back and look at all the questions that you've flagged for review. So you do get that last final check to be able to say, oh, did I answer this one, and do I want to go back and review it again? So you can go back to them certainly after you've answered them before you close out your exam. So wow, this has been really, really useful. I'm excited that A+. The 1200 series is coming out. I hope everybody here had a great time. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you're able to like this and tell everybody else about it so that you can join us for future ones. We do this, about once a month, or certainly when new material comes out. So thank you very much for joining us. Jason, any last words for everybody?
No, that's pretty much it. I thank you all again for joining us, and we'll see you next month. And if you guys have any ideas for AMAs or topics you'd be interested in, you can always shoot us a message at support@diontraining.com, and that'll get up to me and Christina and Jeremiah and the team. And then you can influence what we're going to be talking about next time. So it's hopefully something that's interesting and useful.